Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our second Fireside Chat for this season or overall until now. So I'm excited to have you all here and to also host Muts today to talk about the growth of Imgur, all of the challenges they had in the past, how they overcame them. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our second Fireside Chat. I'm sorry about that. I guess I got the YouTube stream in the background. Uh, so for those of you that are new to this, Adeva's vision is kind of to remove boundaries from work. So we want to enable people from across the world to work with exciting companies like Imgur here. And this is part of that same vision by enabling everyone to learn from the leaders of the industry, basically from the comfort of their home. Welcome, Moods. It's a pleasure to have you here. Just before we start, I want to share that everyone, you can ask questions either in the Q&A section on Zoom or on Slido if you're watching us on YouTube. So someone from my team will share the link for you to ask the questions there, and we'll circle back to them at the end.
Hey, Katerina, it's great to see you. I am so thrilled to be talking to everybody here today. So welcome, everybody. It's 9 a.m. over here in the west coast of the US, but not sure where you are, so it might be good morning, good afternoon, or even good evening.
Yeah, I think we have quite a few people that are in the late evening. So yeah, that's very exciting to gather everyone from all of the different places in the world in the same place right now to chat about this. So let's start with the beginnings. I know that you joined Imgur a bit later in basically in the growing stages, but you're familiar about how things went at the beginning. And you probably heard the stories firsthand from everyone involved. So can you tell us a bit about how it all began, what happened when the app had to grow from a side project to serving millions of users in that short period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no better person to tell the story than Alan Schott, who's the founder CEO of Imgur. But I will share what I know and what I've heard. So Imgur is actually, believe it or not, celebrating its 12th year. So it's 2021 this year. It started back in 2009 when Alan was still a college student. I believe he was probably about 20 years old. And he was really frustrated with how difficult it was or how clunky it was to share images on Reddit. And he was a huge fan on Reddit. He was a big Redditor back in the days. And I believe he spent like 6 or 8 weeks on this side project. He was looking for something to do, saw this problem, and spent several weeks working on it. And then he shared it with the Reddit community. And if you actually go to Reddit and his name on his username on Reddit is Mr. Grimm, you can actually see the original post where he shares the Imgur. He releases
cool.
it to the world. Yeah. Immediately, I think it hit the front page. And he had just like a small instance on, I think it was called, it was a web hosting provider named HostMonster, which I think they're still around. And like, I think immediately, like within 4 hours, he was already hitting its limits.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I think, I remember him telling me when they say, sometimes when they say a solution has like unlimited bandwidth or unlimited compute, it doesn't really mean unlimited. It's unlimited until like you hit a certain threshold or you start impacting other customers. So I think immediately he was like from day one, he was a DevOps engineer, just scaling, finding dedicated solutions. But even though it was 12 years ago, to me, it's fascinating that it started in the cloud. It started Imgur in its roots, from day one was in the cloud. My career goes back further where we rack and stack servers, and we had server rooms, and we had network engineers, and so on. I don't think there was a pivotal moment in Imageur's growth aside from day one. I think it just like took off from there.
And when did they decide to make it a separate project? I mean, completely separate community than Reddit one.
Oh, I think that was also an evolution. From what I know, Alan didn't set out to, he didn't have a startup idea. He didn't start like come up with an idea, go to like, YC and pitch ideas and raise funding. He really wanted to solve a problem and solve it really well. And I think when the images started coming in and started serving it, then I think he just started to add features based on people's feedback. So I think it's just like by instinct, he knew to listen to the users and give them what they want, and then it quickly grew. And within a few years, I think they had a thriving community. And in the beginning, all of the traffic was coming from Reddit, but at some point it became less and less, and people started to come to Imgur directly.
Yeah, to me, that's the best way to grow, because you constantly do it based on what's important for the users, and you just keep adding what they value until it becomes a really, I don't know, something they use daily.
Yeah, exactly.
And you then joined the team around 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. Yes. So yeah, almost 5 years coming up in April. Yeah. So 7 years in, I think, for Imgur.
Nice. What were the early goals when you joined the company? What was basically the reason that you joined?
Yeah, so just to go back a little bit further in my career, I spent many years at another, I should say another, a photo sharing site called Flickr. I spent several years there. And Flickr, was maybe it was a darling in the, what do you call that, like Web 2.0 era. But user generated content, just like the interaction of the community, the many-to-many interactions, the unusual use cases, those are things that always kept me on my toes and were really interesting. And Flickr, was part of Yahoo, and I moved from Flickr to Yahoo Video. And for me, I thought, okay, the world is going video to video. And, I thought it was just a natural progression for my career from focusing on photography, images, to video. But at Yahoo Video, it was more like a media company. It wasn't a UGC platform like YouTube. So basically what you're doing is you're taking a signal from a source, whether it's a sports event or music concert. And in fact, Yahoo was the first one to do a live stream of NFL, which I was fortunate to be a part of. You're basically taking a signal from a source and just blasting it through like multiple CDNs. And it has its challenges for sure, especially live stream. But for me, it got a little bit repetitive because you're kind of doing the same operation over and over again. And I really missed the user-generated content, the community aspect of it, all of the edge cases that come with that. And I really miss that. And I've always known about Imgur from like pretty early on because I was at Flickr, and I was just like, wow, this is a very interesting use case. Free uploads, free link. There's no guarded. It's not a walled garden. You can just freely share the URL. And I've always been curious to see how it was going to pan out. And then my son, who was in preschool at the time, his classmate's dad came to pick up his daughter wearing an Imgur sweatshirt. And then he was like, oh, hey, like we're looking for people like you. Maybe you should apply. And that's how I applied, and I joined Imgur, and the rest is history. In terms of like the solution, the problems that we were trying to solve at the time, there was a lot of stability issues. We were also trying to, there was a lot of like outages, and in fact, there's some like posts back then where people would joke that, oh, Imgur servers are made out of potatoes. And also, we were also trying to get the engineering organization to move faster, which obviously is a challenge for everybody. So I think those are the two things when I came in, we were trying to solve at Imgur.
Were you initially hired to be a head of engineering, or did you start as a software engineer and then just progress with the company?
Yeah, so I came in as director of DevOps. So I came in, yeah, my background
Because
is
that
more
was the main problem at the time.
yeah, infrastructure, production engineering, SRE, like that's kind of my original wheelhouse and background.
I wanted to ask you about the tech stack, but now that you mentioned the infrastructure, let's start with that first. Can you tell us a bit about how it was organized then, how it evolved over the years, and what is it like right now, because you're serving so many users in so many different locations?
Yeah, so as I was saying earlier, it was completely in the cloud. We don't make it a secret that Imgur runs off of AWS. And our CDN is Fastly, and we've been a Fastly shop for quite some time. There was a short era where we were on Cloudflare before my time, and I think we dabbled with Limelight, but we've been using Fastly for a really long time. So in terms of the tech stack, it's funny because as part of the interview process, when I was applying, they said, without knowing anything about Imgur, how would you build Imgur from scratch? And essentially, like what I put on the whiteboard is not all that different from a traditional LAMP stack. So you've got the MySQL database, and then you've got the PHP layer, and then you've got the web servers, and then you have the CDN at a high level. So it was a PHP. When I came in, it was PHP, MariaDB. We use Redis for caching. We also use Memcache. We use Elasticsearch. So just the standard solutions that you might be using yourself.
And then you transitioned from PHP to Go, right?
Yes. So we started to have some issues with the PHP. So we went from PHP, maybe it was like 5.5 when I came in, maybe it was 5.3, upgraded 5.5, and then we got up to PHP 7. But there are a few issues that we started to encounter. So one issue is, hiring. It became more and more challenging to find either PHP developers that wanted to continue to develop in PHP, or that were interested in growing their career as PHP developers. And at the time, there was a huge move to Node, and Go was kind of starting to pick up around that time. So definitely we were thinking about that. We were also just thinking about programming, not just as an individual, moving fast from an individual standpoint, but also from a team standpoint. So we were thinking about, usability, readability of code. And of course, we were also thinking about, having a monolith where it's a large PHP code base. So you tinker something over here, and then something might break over there, or you look at a bunch of code and you thought, oh, this is where the logic for uploading is. And it turns out that's actually deprecated code that is not actually being touched. It's elsewhere. Oh, okay. And so we wanted to kind of tease that apart a little bit and move to Go. Now, there were other benefits that we were thinking about, like concurrency. We were also thinking about performance improvements. But that actually did not pan out for us. Actually, PHP is like perfectly performant, and at least for our use case, and also the way the way that PHP has optimized caching, like it's over the years, I think is just fantastic. And so even though if you do a benchmark comparison between PHP and Go, Go might win in a lot of use cases, except regex. But when you actually put it in the real world, ooh, like we went through a lot of pain with Go because we had to introduce our own Redis cache. The way that it connects to the database is different. We can actually use connection pooling, but then the way that it severs connection with the database keeps these open zombie connections on the database side. So there was a lot of issues that we actually had to work through. And you just realize how tested and how solid PHP actually is. So yeah, have mostly moved to Go. The other challenge, if I could just add, is it's not just about introducing the new, migrating the backend. You have to migrate the clients over. And that seems so obvious, but I think it's something that we as a team overlooked or neglected. So we have a lot of like new API endpoints that are on Go that are ready to be used. But when we're talking about our iOS app and Android app, and they're always under a lot of pressure to build new features, to work on revenue projects. And Katarina, that's why I started talking to you in Tosh. And so until the client adopts the backend, the new API endpoints, like the migration is still not complete. So this is like 3 years into the migration, and we're not fully cut over. And the bottleneck is really on the client side. The back end is like all done.
So how long do you think not a specific number, but how long do the APIs stay there complete to be used, and you're not able to actually change the client side? Or have you had, for example, a case when the web front end uses a different API than the mobile apps?
Yeah, so very interesting question, and I'm actually not sure how relevant going deep into the scale problem is for our participants or audience, but it's a migration and re-architecting. If you've ever attempted it, like it's going to be difficult, and I don't know what the failure rate of a re-architecting project is, but I imagine it can be pretty high. I have had success, but I've also had failures with re-architecting projects. And anytime, head of engineer says we need to do a re-architect or a migration, you should be very cautious. So well, we do have both. We're going to continue to support the old endpoints. We're just not going to fix any bugs.
So right now you're using both the old and the new ones for different scenarios.
Yeah, but I think over 80% of the traffic has moved to the new endpoint, if I'm not mistaken, at least in terms of the traffic volume. So the issue becomes like security, vulnerability. You have to make sure that everything is up to date. So during the migration period, you're like doubling the amount of work that's required. The other is that you might have to go to the old endpoint to get certain types of data, and then you have to go to the new endpoint to get the other set of data. And that is actually caused additional duress on our backend. And since like October of 2020, it's actually caused a lot of problems in Imgur. So if you have ever noticed that the app has not worked, or the desktop site was down, it's because we were trying to maintain both PHP and Go at the same time, and it was like overloading the back end.
And if you think about it from this perspective, would you rather, I mean, if you go back, would you rather create microservices in PHP and transition slowly, or would you still do it the way you did and move to Go? Because you mentioned you had different challenges.
Yeah, I think over time, we will see the benefits of Go for sure. So I have I don't have any second thoughts about the decision that we made. We vetted thoroughly. It was not the most popular decision to go with Go. It didn't have a very popular or well-adopted framework at the time. Node was just like blowing up and in a good way. And there was a lot of engineers that thought we should go to Node instead. So yeah, but we were thinking about the team. We were thinking about how we can keep things simple and move fast from a product development perspective. And then yeah, we did weigh things like concurrency, as I mentioned, the possibility of using gRPC. But ultimately, we're thinking about developing programming as a team.
Right. There is an audience question which is related to this. This might have answered it, but I want to ask it anyway. So what was the most challenging issue related to scaling that you had to deal with so far, and how did you manage to solve it? Was it the architecture of the project or something else?
Yeah. Okay. So Alan went through most of the early challenges. He went from like 0 users to like I don't know 130, over 100 million users per month, like all on his own. So yeah. But in terms of the issues that we have now, the scalability issues comes in weird ways, and so you might have like on Christmas Day, we had tons of traffic because that's the only day the Imgur community allows, I shouldn't say allow, but that encourages selfies. And so not only are there a lot of gallery submissions of people's selfies, they say, hey, Merry Christmas, here's my selfie for the selfie day. There's also a lot of comments. So there's a lot of interaction. And for those types of situations, obviously, like your caching strategy is everything. And the more that you can cache on the edge, the more that you can push compute to the edge, the better off you're going to be. Your origin, we have a huge, I think the biggest or the second biggest EC2 instance for our databases, but they're not going to be able to handle all the traffic. So wherever you can, like I think when you're thinking about scaling, it's all about how you cache, caching algorithms, the layers of cache, your TTL, how can you cache on the client, on the browser? Yeah, so that would be my number 1 advice. Number 2 advice, think about your timeouts, think about your retry mechanisms. I don't know how many times we've DDoSed ourselves in my career. Happened at Flickr, happened at Yahoo Video, happened at Imgur. When you don't have thoughtful retry mechanisms on your own apps or on your own client, your client apps, you're going to take down your own site. So exponential backoff or like no retries, let the user retry on their own. Those are definitely things to think about as well.
And are you still using Redis or are you using something else?
Oh, we love Redis. We love it so much that I think started to abuse it a little bit, and then we got burned. And but what I mean by that is it was so solid, and I think after we upgraded from version 3 to version 4, we started to use it as our persistent storage, even though it's all in memory. We had a Redis cluster. And when you have a cluster, obviously it's highly available, but it doesn't protect you against data corruption, right? When you have a cluster HA. And I think we had either the replication was broken or something. And there was, I think it was an early version of Redis 4, and there was a bug, and it was evicting keys without us like knowing. And by the time we noticed, we had like billions of keys that were just had been purged. Yeah, so we did have some issues with that, and we said, okay, let's make sure that we're flushing all the data from Redis to, I think we ended up spinning up an RDS instance, and that solved that. And yeah, so it's been great. We use Redis everywhere. We have it in our Kubernetes. I think we use it as a equivalent of the APC cache or ops cache on PHP on the Go side. Like we have a tiny Redis on each of the Go instances.
And is there anything else from the tech stack that you'd like to emphasize here? Because we started the question, but I don't think we completed everything.
Yeah, the only thing that I would suggest, and I think it's true of both like scaling, technical, and even in product, I think as engineers, you want to like be prepared for everything. And when you have something that like you encounter a problem and you have some defensive code, or you had thought about it and it just automatically handles that situation, it definitely feels great. But I think that situation happens less often than you think. I think it's good to be a little bit forward thinking, but it's also good. I think it's also in general good to wait for the problem to come up, or to kind of see it coming, rather than to try to think through every possible use case and edge case and solve it preemptively. Because I think 80-90% of the things that you think are going to happen don't happen, and then something that you didn't expect at all might happen. So that would be like my high level approach. So scaling, yeah, anything like that. Just like be a few steps ahead, but not too many steps ahead, and let the problem, come to you.
Yeah, that's a good advice. And I guess you just need to be aware of what solutions exist out there, so that when you do have a need, you know where to look or what to check.
Yeah, no, that's also great to know what's happening out there, what's available, what's happening in other organizations. So like talking to your colleagues, your friends. My friend, who's actually, I think he's SVP of Quizlet now, Tim Miller, and we used to work together at Flickr, and we would have like this list of phone numbers of people that we would be able to call in case there was some issue that we didn't know. Like, oh, if there's a networking issue, this is who we're going to call. And at the time, there was a show, I don't even know if it's on or not. It's called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? And one of the things that you can do is phone a friend. So like Tim and I would say, okay, if we need to phone a friend, we call this person for that, this person for databases. So yeah, it's also a good thing to have.
Yeah, that's a great approach. Okay, and around the images, so I read somewhere that you keep all of the images forever unless a delete is requested. Is that correct?
So yes, as a whole, but there are images that we consider orphaned, or we don't know if they're needed anymore. We assume they're not needed anymore. So if an anonymous user, so you can actually upload and share images on Imgur as an anonymous user, which I thought, back in my Flickr days, I thought that was like, how is this ever going to work as a business? So if you upload an image anonymously and it's only had 1 or 2 views, in its lifetime. So let's say an image is 5 years old, it was uploaded anonymously, only has 1 or 2 views. Like we eventually do clean those out. And so when we actually started this project, I want to say 2 years ago, I was like, oh yes, we're going to save so much on storage. Actually turned out not to be the case. There aren't that many anonymous uploads with very few views, but also the image sizes, right, and video sizes have grown over the years. So percentage-wise, these older images that are not useful, turned out to be a smaller percentage than we thought.
And how do you manage that? I mean, apart from caching, do you have any other strategies or any tips that you can share with people who are dealing with image-heavy websites? Or mobile apps?
So let's see. Well, again, I think you want to be able to cache the images in the CDN. So you want to make sure that there's different sizes of images that you want to be able to serve to your phone, to the desktop, different resolution. But you also want to be selective about how many different thumbnail sizes you do, because each one occupies its own cache key. So you want to optimize both for speed. Like smaller images are going to go through the network faster for sure, but you also want to make sure that it's fewer so that they can get cached closer to the edge. So that's one thing. We do support various formats, and depending on the client, the different formats, how would you say, get displayed differently, are treated differently. Sometimes they don't even work. So you do have to be careful about that. Like for example, on on Android, you make heavy use of WebP, and then on iOS, I think recently our iOS app can support WebP now, but traditionally we have not. So depending on the client, you use different formats. We've dabbled quite a bit with different types of compression. And it was something that I thought I could bring value to Imgur right off the bat, because we used a solution called JPEG Mini. Tremendous success at Flickr. But when we brought it into Imgur, I was really surprised. Even though it seems like Flickr is like a high quality photography site and Imgur is just like low resolution memes and GIFs, people notice the compression like immediately, like within an hour. And I was trying to understand why. It's because people like to zoom in. So like in the browser, you might get the original, like when we first load the thumbnail, that's a low quality. But people love to zoom in to see like the big image, and then they see the artifacting or the pixelating, and they're like, hey, what's going on? So we actually had to roll back. We tried different types of compression, never found a whole lot of success. The one area where we've had success, and this was rolled out way before I joined, but was converting the GIF files to MP4s. And that's been a huge, I think, savings in terms of performance, but also storage, because we can just like archive the original GIFs and just have the MP4s at the higher available storage.
Nice. Yeah, I also read that somewhere. And back in 2017, there was a data breach of some sort. I'm not sure how.
Oh,
You
yeah.
can tell us more about that.
Fun.
And what changes did that force you to make?
Yeah, that was not fun. We call that the Thanksgiving data breach. I was driving home from San Francisco to Los Angeles, where my parents are, And then I get a call from our then COO, Roy Seagal. So I pulled over and he says, hey, like I got this email from a security expert named Troy Hunt. And I don't think this is we didn't know him at the time. We know him very well now. And he says, I don't think this is fake. I think there's something going on and we need to investigate. And so this is 2017. And what had happened was there was a breach back in 2013, I want to say, where the some percentage of user passwords, they were not leaked. I think there was another data breach that happened elsewhere. And they used that list to brute force into Imgur, and some of them matched. And yeah, so nowadays, I think you'll see like either on browsers or even on your phone, if you've used a password that was part of now there's a big list, right, of breached passwords. And so yeah, if the browser or your phone notices that you're using a password from the breach, they say, hey, password's been part of a leak, so you may want to use a strong password instead. And so that's something that we had to do like on that day, basically like go through, I forget how many accounts were compromised, but we updated all the passwords, notified all the users, and then also informed those that had passwords in the breached list as well, even though that they were not in the, even though their accounts were not compromised. If we noticed that they were using like, I don't know, password 123, or their password is ABCDEF, we notified them and said, hey, like you should change your password.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Before we move to questions from the audience, there are quite a few that I see right now. I want to talk a bit about Melee. So that's your latest project focused on the gaming community. Basically, what I'm mostly interested in is what were the tech choices, inspired or based on everything you learned from past experience? Like, how did you decide to start this new project, and what were the mistakes you tried to avoid since the beginning?
Yeah, oh, fantastic question. Katerina, I think you're going to have to get Alan in this fireside chat next time, because Melee is also so Imgur was a side project when he was in college. Melee kind of started as a side project while he was at Imgur. And for those of you that happen to know him or know about him, he's a huge gamer, loves gaming. And he noticed that a lot of people save their gaming clips, gaming highlights, but they just kind of sit there on your computer or on your phone or on your console. And there isn't really a really great platform for sharing your gaming highlights. So that was the idea behind Melee. And yeah, so we had a few engineers from the Imgur core engineering team, and they started kind of the founding engineering team at Melee. And they took a lot of the learnings that they had from Imgur, and they also wanted to try different things. So as I mentioned, we use in Imgur, it was basically EC2 instances, PHP, and then we were moving to Go microservices on Kubernetes. They wanted to try serverless. So Melee started out with infrastructure as code as kind of the mindset, using Lambda functions. And they also used GitLab, which I think is because it was before GitHub Actions. But yeah, so I think they wanted to try dabble with some of the newer technologies, and they are still, I think they are using Go back on the back end for Melee. There was also a lot of deliberation about using React Native, or keeping the iOS team in the using Swift on iOS and Kotlin on Android. And that was actually a very another hot topic that we debated over, and we just decided to use the native languages because we wanted to give the best experience for our users, and we weren't sure that we would be able to do that in a sustained fashion over time. So, yeah.
So Melee is basically like Imgur for gamers, right?
Yeah, we think of it exactly like that. There are a lot of gamers on Imgur, but Imgur is not specifically made for highlights, right? It's like more comes from it's a community-based, just an overall entertainment destination. Started out as an image host. Melee, from its very beginning, ground up, is for sharing your gaming highlights.
So if there's any gamer listening, definitely check it out. Is it available for web already or not yet?
Not yet. So yeah, it's available on iOS and it's available on Android. So yes, please check it out. It would be great if you can, give it a shot.
Great. Okay, so let's move to the questions from the audience. We have one around moderation of the content. So I think
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So user-generated content being unpredictable, how do you deal with the moderation of the content?
Sorry. Well, first of all, I think the TLDR to that is you do the best that you can, because it's I guess what you call an arms race, right? You figure out, okay, these types of content are things that don't belong on the platform, and then something new comes up. But we have several different strategies. We do have classifiers that we run when people submit, actually when people upload any image, to see if they are safe for the community or not. We also, anything that is publicly shared in the gallery. So when you upload an image to or video to Imgur, you can keep it hidden. The URLs are public, but you can keep it hidden for yourself, for your own private sharing, or you can share publicly with the community. And any image or video that you share into the community, we have a team of moderators that takes a look at it and examines it on top of the classifier that we run. So we do, and we have a policy. We test the moderation and to make sure that it's up to date. But it's an ongoing challenge for sure. We also work with organizations like NECMEC, the Natural Center of Exploited Missing Children. There's an organization who is associated with Ashton Kutcher named We Are Thorn. And they do a lot of human trafficking and child abuse, child pornography. And so we work with NGOs and organizations like that as well to make sure that we're keeping everybody that interacts with Imgur safe, and then also going after the bad actors as well.
Mm-hmm. And are the moderators from the community, or are the external people? I mean, your internal.
Both, actually. Yeah, both. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So I believe the moderation team will handpick certain people from the community. Mm-hmm. But also we also do have people that are not active participants in the community that do moderation as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, next question. What kind of analytics or tool software do you use to understand user behavior and how to improve the UX?
Yeah, okay. So that's a great question. we've been on a solution called Amplitude for maybe 2 or 3 years now. And it's allowed us to do things like funnel analysis, A/B testing, and we've been able to instrument our apps much better than what we had before. I won't talk about the prior solution, but we do use Amplitude for that. And so, yeah, we try to test everything that we can. It's not always possible, but yeah, we use Amplitude for our instrumentation. We also, do have things like Google Analytics and Quantcast, but those are only good for like top level metrics, and they don't really give you insight into user behavior.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the more on the technical side, my gosh, when I arrived at Imgur and I saw Datadog, I was just so impressed, and it was almost like love at first sight. So I don't have enough good things to say about Datadog for system metrics. I would love to be able to use Splunk, but it was a little bit beyond our price point. So for some time we used Sumo Logic for log aggregation analytics, and then but we actually stood up our own Elk stack to do the log stashing and log analysis.
Great. And another, not similar, but related, regarding site speeds. How do you measure that, and how do you handle when an overload occurs?
How do you measure site speed? So we do have telemetry metrics from our apps on image load times, app start times, crash rates. A lot of that you can, some of that we do through Amplitude, some of that we do through Firebase. Yeah, so we do have telemetry data. And then in terms of how do you know when outages occur? Well, there's definitely, like, over time, we know what to look for. But two possible ways I think is very common for us is we look at the error rate. So the number of 50x, 500, 503s, the rate of the 500s that we are serving, I guess, is one way to tell. But 503s don't, monitoring 503s don't help if the network, there's no traffic at all. So we also measure how much traffic is flowing through both ingress and egress. So between the two, we can usually tell if there's a problem. There are situations where perhaps there's some issue with a Fastly POP, like point of presence. So I think, if they're spinning up a new data center and new POP, and they turn it on like too early before everything's set up, sometimes we'll get users saying, hey, I'm over here in Texas and Imgur isn't working for us. So for those things, we don't necessarily have good geo data. We usually get those types of geo-specific outages through our community support team.
And when dealing with an upgrade or a change in the infrastructure, what usually triggers that?
Oh, yeah. Well, hopefully it's not like, hey, there's a lot of reasons, right? Hopefully it's not, hey, thanks for using our solution, but we've been acquired by so-and-so, or we're no longer solvent and we're going out of business. So you're going to have to come off of our solution. So that's actually happened before, where we've had to do an upgrade or migration because of external circumstances. Ooh. But yeah, aside from that, I mean, I think you might start to see the age of the technology that you selected. Like, hey, like there's no more, we're going to stop doing upgrades, or you're going to have to upgrade to a newer version because we're not going to be doing any new patches. There's also just like where the industry is going. Like we're probably like, if we had the developers that we had forever and we can hire more of the same, it may have been okay to be on PHP. But we're getting a lot of feedback from the market saying, hey, it's getting really hard to find up and coming PHP developers or that want to build a career off of it. So that was another signal for us. The adoption of languages in the market. I think there's an endless factor, but it's probably predominantly like tech debt and making sure that you're not so far behind that it's either impossible or like impossibly expensive to upgrade. You don't want to be backed into that corner.
Mm-hmm.
Katerina, I see some Q&A in the Zoom Q&A portion from Dane.
Is it GIF or GIF?
Yeah. So I always thought it was GIF, hard G, graphics, like, is it interlace files or something like that. But Alan said he actually spoke to the person that invented the file format, and Alan asked him point blank, and he said it's GIF. And just as you pronounce it Imgur and not Imgur, the person that invented the name should have the right to claim how it's pronounced. And so I understand that it's GIF. And then in terms of, there's, I think, a separate question also from Dane about video, separate video streaming service. Not a separate streaming video service. We've been trying to do more and more video at Imgur. We want to increase the video length from, I think it's, what is it, like 30 seconds, or maybe it's 2 minutes right now, to something a little bit longer, like 5 minutes. We have considered doing live stream, but I think we do all of our events, community events like Extra Life. We use Twitch for that. So I think there's a lot of great alternatives for video right now. We just want to make sure that we make it available as an entertainment destination for our community. But I don't see it as a strategic, like, oh yeah, Imgur is going to become Videogur or anything like that.
Just I want to disclose something. I'm also calling it, I was calling Imgur in the past. And a lot of people I talk to don't always understand what I mean when I say Imgur, because I think they're used to a different pronunciation. So this is a note for everyone. Just don't pronounce it that way. Okay, back to the questions from Slido. So we have, what's the deployment strategy you use and how often do you experiment with that?
Deployment strategy. Oh, I think, okay, so it's different for every platform. So as I was mentioning, on Melee, they use GitLab, and on the Imgur platform, they use Buddy Build. We've tried so many different things, but we moved to Buddy Build a couple years ago, and that's actually been working the best for us. And Buddy Build, deployment, yeah, so like Firebase on the apps. And yeah, deployment's one of those things that is very repetitive and more or less the same, but it can also be very time consuming and very error prone if you do it manually. So I think in general, we try to automate as much as we can. Yeah, so we're not quite like fully CI CD where it gets merged automatically and deployed. But we have pushed it to the point where it's not as labor intensive as doing everything by hand. Yeah, I'm not sure that I answered the question well, but.
Yeah, I think you did. If not, they will follow up with another one, and yes, and following the questions. In terms of the framework, I mean, PHP Go, what we talked earlier. So there is a question which is very interesting to me, whether you have an opinion around using the language itself over a framework, or maybe a combination of the two.
Over the framework.
So you mentioned when you started with Go, there were no reliable frameworks, and I guess you needed to do everything from scratch. Do you think that's better for scalability or for a large scale application?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really great question. So like, you know, obviously like Python, even at the time, Python and JS had a lot larger ecosystem and multiple frameworks that you could use.
Do you use any framework right now with Go, or is it?
Yeah, it's called Go Micro. Yeah, yeah, and we've been very happy with that. But yeah,
So I guess that answers the question.
It does, but the options are very limited. There's like, okay, we've got like one of two, or we could build our own. Yeah. So I think ideally, yeah, I think okay, so let's do it this way. So if there's like zero framework and you have to build the entire framework on your own, then I would advise against it. So I don't know, I haven't looked into this for a little bit, but let's say you wanted to do like server-side Swift. Actually, a couple years ago, there was like nothing. And so you had to like hand roll everything by scratch. Like that's not what we want our engineers to spending their time on. Maybe that's what the engineers want to work on, but Imgur is a company where we're bringing value to our users through product and through entertainment. And so we want to put our users first. And while it might be a very interesting project for a company that's specifically in building frameworks, or is a bigger company that can own the entire stack from top to bottom, Imgur is not that. Yeah, so we need to rely on other people, whether it's open source or another solution that has a robust framework for us. So without a framework, there's no absolutely no, there's no choice. You can't use that, so it's an automatic rejection. But yeah, it was good enough. The Go Micro solution was good enough for us to move forward with it.
So I guess for everyone working on a project of a smaller scale, it's safe to say that it's best to rely on something that's already been done and tested, and you can use out of the box than reinvent the wheel all the time.
Yeah, or even if you have to invent the wheel for the first time, I would avoid it. Unless that is your business.
Great. Okay, anything you want to wrap up with? There's some more questions, but we're running out of time. So maybe just a final thought from you to close this up.
Oh, it was just an absolute pleasure speaking to everybody. And Katerina, thank you so much. And I'm sure you're going to have a lot more fantastic speakers in the future. So everybody should continue to look forward to more of these fireside chats. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Muts for attending, and thanks everyone for joining us. This will go live on YouTube. I mean, it's already live on YouTube, so it will stay there if you want to rewatch it and just take some notes from what was said. Thanks again. Have a great evening, great day, wherever you are, and see you next month.